Hearing me saying this, especially those either in the West or those brainwashed through to believe that the future of Africa is cast and dried as one of the victim status and charity case, they may take this as either naive or wishful thinking. Openly, I want to tell you, African continent is vital to the global economy and the future and the geopolitical stability. Africa, and in particular Tanzania, besides being is the cradle of humankind, holds around 30% of the world's critical mineral reserves required for green energy and technological transformation. We are not just hanging as on the map. We are actually at the center and determining the future of green energy and technological transformation. We are very vital to the global economy and the future of the geopolitics stability. Back to the current reality of humankind's global powers, including China, the United States of America, Russia, and the European Union. These are increasingly competing for strategic partnerships, unregulated access to critical minerals, and unrestricted diplomatic influences across Africa. While this competition enhances Africa's countries' bargaining power, it is also risky, drawing them into border rivalry, potentially fragmenting and increasing competition among the major powers. We learn today, as I said, the scrambles and struggles only change names. Today, in Africa and across the global south, a dignity network, recently known as the Gen Z movement, is reshaping the political discourse. Youth-led mobilization are challenging governance, and the entrenched authoritarian models. At the same time, the necessity for order and the resulting repression where it occurs, and have continued to evoke international disengagement and heightens risk, reducing external pressure for restraint while leveraging legitimate domestic sectors challenged over the best way forward. Across the continent, there is a clash between the aging political establishments, with many leaders stepping term limits, and highly connected, well-funded, youth-empowered, and led civic movements, like what I've said at the recent protests in many African countries. Given different names, others demanding for transparency and accountability, others dismantling the traditional elite structures, and many, many other names. But deep inside, seriously, it is the sponsored scramble for wealth and natural resources, mostly found in Africa. Furthermore, in areas like the Sahel, dissatisfaction with the social contract and elite corruption has led to a rise in military takeovers that often enjoy initial civic support but remains unaware of the sustainable long-term dividends to their people. Something you have to note here that several scholars and development institutions argue that Africa development challenges are closely associated with weaknesses in leadership, governance, institutional capacity, and accountability. But well, for today's context, I leave that to you to objectively debate You are our strategists. Suffice to say, at this point, we may ask ourselves this question again. What must currently and emerging African leaders do to turn the 21st century global trends into tangible development on the ground, which is the question of many Africans? What must currently and emerging African leaders do to turn the 21st century global trends into tangible development on the ground? Commandants, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of economy, the continent is seen as a driver of global growth, with a projected average economic growth rate of around 4.3% in 2026, mostly driven by few key African economies. But here is the challenge. The vast majority of African exports are primarily products, with fossil fuel accounting for about half of the total exports, depending on their pricing. Consequently, I wish to present that the external states have a variety of interests in Africa, which includes, though not limited to, critical mineral resources, markets, and the associated security of supply and demands, in addition to geopolitical realities and challenges. Furthermore, the intensifying competition of the critical minerals is giving rise to a new resource for security arrangements, giving rise deepening strategic rivalries between the Western powers, China, and other major powers such as Russia and India. Increasingly, this context centers on ensuring which centers to ensuring reliable supply chains, as illustrated by the now on-fit mentioned the Lobito Corridor, which literally seeks to link the mineral-rich areas of the DRC and Zambia to Angola, that's the Lobito Port. The corridor is intended to facilitate the export of minerals, largely in raw form, to the Western Hemisphere via the Atlantic Ocean. On the flip side, however, Africa remains marginalized on both global investment and geopolitical influences, with heavy reliance on extractive industries and disunited, inwardly self-competing stance. All these capabilities leading to continued external dependence. In this case again, I need to ask to you all, or we ask ourselves, what should the African nations do to ensure their own robust intercontinental trade and sovereignty over strategic, mineral, and human resources? Because that is the center of the scramble for today. Global security trends in 21st century, marked by the growing prevalences of asymmetric warfare and intensifying geopolitical rivalries and climate-related crises, are increasingly undermining human security and economic development across Africa. These complex but interconnected threats constrains the continent's development by fueling regional instability, diverting scarce state resources, and discouraging essential domestic and foreign investments. Taking as an example, the military confrontation involving in the United States, Israel, and Iran has exerted considerable pressure on global energy markets while disrupting to maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz